Lots of things are catchy. Lots of things are catchy. Anger is catchy. Jealousy is catchy. Lots of things. What are you putting out there that you want people to catch up with, right? Think about that. Kindness. I don't know if you noticed, the person that it started with is the person it ended with. Did you see how it went full circle? And that's how it works. What we give, we get back. All right. Myself together here. All right, we had 2 weeks in a row of rain, as I was talking about eye of the storm. And now the storm has passed. But I want you to know, we got the books a little late for that series, but they're in the bookstore if you're interested. The Eye of the Storm, a phenomenal, awesome book. So today is the first day of a new month, and that means that we are talking about a new value. And the value that we're talking about this month for August in Centers for Spiritual Living is love, compassion, and caring. And today I'm going to talk about having compassion for ourselves. This is how the value is talked about. That's gone out to all different centers. And just so you know, I don't have to do these. There's nobody that says you have to talk about this month or this week. I choose to because I love the energy and the idea that there are centers all over the country that are talking about the same thing this morning. That we create an energy and a buzz around these ideas and a feeling so that it starts to accelerate for all of us. So the way we explain this is we embrace love as the self-givingness of God to all creation. Let me say that again. We embrace love as the self-givingness of God to all creation. God is love. We are made in the image and likeness of our Creator. We are love. So we embrace that. We embrace love as the self-givingness of Spirit itself, moving through us into expression as compassion, caring, mutual respect, and kindness. These are the ways that we express love, right? Is through compassion, mutual respect, and kindness, like you saw in the video. We express interest in and support for the well-being of ourselves and others. It is very important that we be well ourselves, that we feel whole, that we feel complete, that we feel the love for ourselves so we can then give it to other people. So we feel that for ourselves and for others. And we express unconditional love when observing the suffering of others and do what we can to give aid and to show compassion. So that's what this month's talks are going to be about, and we're going to hit it from a couple of different angles. This morning, compassion. And I want to give you a definition of compassion. Compassion is the sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. It means we are aware of the pain, of the suffering, of the hurt of other people, and we have a desire to alleviate that, to make that better for them. The word comes from passion, which is a Latin word that means to feel, and the prefix with. So we feel with. When we have compassion for someone, we feel with them. I want to read you just a little bit from a book called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. Anybody ever heard of that? Anyone intrigued by that title, like I was? Yes, I was too. And I'm going to talk from here again next week, so I'm just going to intro this for you. It is written by a gentleman by the name of Marcus Borg. And Marcus Borg is a historian. He is a religious historian. He is also a Christian. I believe he's a minister at the same time. So he brings a very interesting perspective to the life and teaching of Jesus. And he has this to say about compassion. In the Hebrew Bible, which Christians typically call the Old Testament, and which was sacred scripture to Jesus and his Jewish contemporaries, the word compassion has many rich associations. In Hebrew as well as Aramaic, and Aramaic is the language that Jesus himself spoke, the word usually translated as compassion is the plural of the noun that in its singular form means the womb. Compassion means the womb in Hebrew. In the Hebrew Bible, compassion is both a feeling and a way of being that flows out of that feeling. Sometimes it is very specifically linked to its association with the womb. For example, a woman feels compassion for the child that was within her womb. A man feels compassion for the brother who came from the same womb. In terms of feeling, compassion means to feel with. To feel with. So that's what we're talking about. A very deep, very, very deep, visceral kind of feeling that you have for people when you feel that compassion, that welling up, when you see someone in distress. But today, specifically, we're going to talk about the idea of having compassion for ourselves. I don't know if you've noticed the pattern when I speak. We take a value. I always like to apply it to ourselves first, to the individual themselves, and then we apply it outside so that we know how to use that. We have to embody it for ourselves, though, first, before we can teach it or share it with other people. So this morning we're going to talk about compassion as it relates to ourselves. And Jack Kornfield, Buddhist, very famous writer, said that if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. And I think that's just a beautiful saying. So as we get into this a little bit more, I want to start with what compassion is not, what self-compassion is not. Because there's some confusion around this. Number one, having self-compassion is not having self-pity. And by self-pity, I mean that tendency to emphasize the ego, right? The feelings of separation, isolation, like, y'all don't know what I have been through, right? The pain and the suffering, like nobody knows what this pain is, to have this illness, or to have gone through this betrayal, or to have had this loss or this grief. Anybody ever been there? Just that feeling of I'm all alone in my pain and isolated. That's self-pity. That's coming from that poor me kind of a place. And that's not what we're talking about with self-compassion. It is also not self-indulgent. What do I mean by self-indulgent? That's when you kind of give yourself a pass. I'm just feeling so terrible about this. I think I'll just eat a giant banana nut muffin. or a whole
Krispy Kreme.
A whole dozen Krispy Kremes. Right? People do that. We give ourselves, like, you want to give yourself a pass, right? I'm going to do this. I'm going to have a few drinks. I'm going to do whatever because I'm feeling bad about whatever this situation is, as if that is compassion for the self. And that is not the same thing. That's self-indulgent. And it's not always healthy. It's giving into self-pleasure at the expense of your own health and long-term happiness. Self-compassion is not that either. Self-compassion also is not self-esteem. Now, this is such a big one, it gets its whole own section. What do we mean by self-esteem? Self-esteem is that confidence that we have in our own worth and abilities. It is our self-respect. It refers to a person's sense of self-worth or their perceived value. Psychologists have said that it is the ultimate marker of psychological health. Now, that all sounds very wonderful, right? We all want to have good self-esteem, don't we? Right? There's been a huge movement in this country, and it probably started in the 70s, maybe the 80s, of boosting self-esteem for young people, for children, and it's kind of the buzzword. Now, there's nothing wrong with self-esteem, but there is a downside. Self-esteem in and of itself is not a problem. The problem with self-esteem is not that we have it, but how we get it. How we get that sense of self-confidence and how we get that feeling of self-respect and feeling like we're worthy, right? How do we get that? Where it becomes a problem is when we feel like we have to be better than someone else to have that self-esteem. Understand? Feeling special and feeling like we're above average. So now if everybody is above average, is that even possible? Because average is a certain level, right? Some people above that. And we may be above average in different areas in our lives, right? Someone may be a great musician, an above average musician, but they may not be a great mathematician, right? We all have different gifts. We all have different abilities. So this idea of feeling like we are better than someone is problematic. It's problematic. Another analogy for you. There are two ways that you can have the tallest building in a city. Right? You can have a tall building by building the tallest structure. You can also have the tallest building by tearing down everything else around you. Right? Which way do you want to have your worth, your self-esteem? Not by tearing down others, but by building yourself up. Self-esteem can result in narcissistic, self-absorbed behavior. Right? Because I'm so much better than everyone else. Where does that leave other folks? It creates unhealthy social dynamics, like bullying and prejudice, because we have to put other people down so that we can feel better about ourselves. This is a downside to self-esteem. And then finally, it's contingent on your success. Whatever you call success is, whatever that means for you, your self-esteem may be tied to that, to an outside marker for yourself, right? I have self-esteem because I'm so good at this or that. Well, what happens when that thing disappears? When there's a problem, when there's a situation, and you can't quite be up to the standard that maybe you even set for yourself. What happens to your self-esteem? It plummets, right? Because you're feeling like you're not successful, like you're a failure. So self-esteem tends to be tied to what is happening on the outside of you. That's how you make your judgment about whether you're worthwhile. It's based on the judgments of other people and whatever is happening from the outside. Does that make sense for everyone? Yes. Okay. If you have questions, raise your hand. I'm okay with that. I want to make sure it's very clear. So that's the downside of self-esteem. Now here are the three components of self-compassion. This is what makes self-compassion different than self-esteem or self-indulgence or self-pity. Number one, it is the idea of being kind to oneself. It means understanding rather than feeling the need to judge or to punish ourselves. It is the idea that we treat ourselves as well as we would treat our most beloved family member or close friend. You know, how much different would your life be if you treated yourself as well as you treat some other people? Many of us don't do that. Too many of us don't do that. So self-compassion means self-kindness. It also is a recognition of our common humanity. It is realizing our imperfections are part of our shared human experience. Nobody in human form is absolutely perfect or wonderful at everything. We all mess up, Gail, we do. We all have failures or things that don't quite go our way. And that's just part of life. It is true of every single one of us. Everyone in this room has had trials and tribulations. Every single one of us has made mistakes. Every one of us might look at some things in our lives and wish we had done them differently. Right? That is part of our shared humanity. The thing is, that's not the stuff people are putting on Facebook, is it? They're not putting on Facebook when they screw up. So we're here in our lives feeling like screw-ups and seeing everybody else's life and thinking that they're just wonderful, and why can't my life be as perfect and fabulous as somebody else's? Look at so-and-so, they're traveling again. Or look at this one, they've lost all this weight. Or this other one who's having a baby, and I can't. All of these things that we're seeing outside of us and thinking that we're somehow less than. Because people are not sharing. They don't share these parts of themselves. So we don't see it, but I guarantee you, everyone has their trials. The next part of that self-compassion is to be mindful, meaning to be in the moment. We talk about this a lot, don't we? Mindfulness, calm in the eye of the storm, requires that we be mindful and centered. This means that you're not ruminating, you're not going over and over and over again the problem, the situation. It's being in the moment, neither ignoring what has happened or exaggerating those feelings of failure. It's just being in the moment and being realistic, basically, but not overly one way or another. So these are the components of self-compassion. Now, why aren't we compassionate with ourselves? I'll say it has a lot to do with this thing we call the voice of judgment. Is anyone familiar with that? Anyone have that voice in their head that tells them, that says nasty things? when you make a mistake or say, there, again, I'm such a screw up, or any other number of assorted words you might use in that place. It's a voice of judgment that is internalized. Where does it come from? Where do y'all think it comes from?
Environment.
Your environment. Yes, past, exactly, Nancy. It comes from when we're children. When we're children. And not that people are intentionally trying to be hurtful or mean, it's that they're trying to have us grow up right. Our parents, our teachers, authority figures, they may start out by telling you things that are meant to motivate you, because that was maybe how they learned, right? The kid who brings home a bad grade on a report card, and the parent who says, you're such a disappointment. And that's meant to motivate, right? Anybody hear those kind of comments? It's meant, you know it was meant to motivate. They wanted you to do better. But what does that do? It tears you down. It ends up tearing you down. And what happens for us, and again, this is kind of a universal thing, is that we internalize that voice. We internalize the voice of judgment that may have started with our parents and our teachers and authority figures, and then it becomes a voice in our own head. And then we say things to ourselves that we would never ever dream about saying to someone else. Anyone had that experience? I was remembering this morning a conversation I had with someone probably 20 years ago. And I don't remember what I was going through at the time, but it was some kind of drama. And I got this woman's ear, and I just went on and on about how pitiful and sad my life was. And I did. I thought I was just venting, and finally she said, would you stop? Would you just stop that? You're hurting me. And I thought, how am I hurting her? She was like, to hear the ugliness that is coming out of your mouth hurts me. Please don't say those things about yourself. And I still, to this day, I remember, I haven't seen her probably since. We were going through classes and things together. So, this is something that we do. This is something that we do. And I think back again, another friend of mine who we would get together and we'd have those moments of venting and sharing. And she would say to me, I wish you could see what I see in you. When are you going to be able to see what I see in you? And that has stayed with me. And I think I can say I'm there. Not always. That voice comes up every once in a while. It still says ugly things, but now I recognize it much faster. It's a practice. It's a spiritual practice. And the more you get in the practice of loving yourself, the quicker you recognize that voice. And the quicker you recognize the lie that it is telling you. So the voice of judgment is something that we all have, and that's why we identify with it. And one of the reasons we identify is because we don't want to be self-indulgent. We don't want to be in self-pity. We don't want to be in that place of looking like we're lazy, and we think that it's going to motivate us. We think that our own self-criticism is going to motivate us, just like our parents or our teachers thought they were motivating us when they said, you're such a loser. Or get up off your rear end and do something. You're such a disappointment. We tell ourselves these things as to motivate ourselves. But as you know, it doesn't do that. It really doesn't do that. Why self-criticism doesn't work? Because it puts us into fight or flight or freeze mode. There is a part of our brain, in each and every one of us, again, this is a universal thing, that is responsible for your fight or flight. And when we feel threatened, you don't even think about it. You see something scary coming at you, you're going to do one of those three things. You don't have to think about that. It just happens. You're either going to fight back, you're going to take off running, or you're going to freeze. And think about the animal kingdom. This is again, universal. Fight, flight, or freeze. This is what happens to people when they feel threatened. Now, what happens when you are the one who is threatening yourself? You have nowhere to go. You are both the perpetrator and the victim. It is a no-win situation. It's a no-win situation. Now think about how motivated are you when you're feeling depressed? How motivated are you when you're feeling put down? Does that make you want to do anything more? No, it makes you want to stay in bed and pull the covers up over your head and say, I'm out, I'm not playing anymore. Self-criticism doesn't work. It does not work. But feeling compassion for ourselves in no way frees us from responsibility for our actions. Rather, it releases us from the self-hatred that prevents us from responding to our life with clarity and with balance. See, when we can practice that kindness, when we can practice that mindfulness, when we can remember that we're just human beings, just like everybody else, doing the best we can, it calms us down. So that voice of judgment isn't so loud anymore. And now you can start to see your life more clearly. You get to see more of the options. You get to see more possibility. Fear shuts you down. Fear constricts your possibilities and what you're able to see. Self-love, self-compassion does the opposite. It expands your possibilities. And you don't have to wait for someone else to love you, to do it for you. You can start yourself. You can start yourself. The benefits of self-compassion. Seems like that would be pretty self-evident, right? Now this is actually, there are people who are now studying this stuff. This talk for me actually came out of the work that I've been doing at the prison. I did a couple of sessions on forgiveness. We're doing Mary Morrissey's Dream Builder program. And I felt a really strong need to give the gentleman a process for self-forgiveness. We can talk about it, but it's like, how do you actually get down and do it? When you've done something very hurtful to someone else, or you've not lived up to your potential, you've got a lot of pain, how do you let go of that when it's yourself? Sometimes it's easier to forgive other people. In fact, I would say for the majority of us, it is easier to forgive somebody else than it is to forgive ourselves. So I was looking for something, and you know, there was very, very little. In fact, I don't think I found anything that was actually on a process for self-forgiveness. What I did find was some information on self-compassion. So that's where this talk came from. And there's more and more I'm finding out. There's more and more. So there are people who are doing research on this idea, and you know, the voice of judgment versus the self-compassion, and how do we make the most of our lives? And how do we teach and help others make the most of their lives? So this comes from some of those studies. So the benefits of self-compassion, number one, you're going to have a lot less stress, a lot less anxiety, as well as less depression, and that feeling of having to be perfect. Because again, it's okay. We all make mistakes. We don't have to be perfect. This was like a breath of fresh air for me. Anybody else in here perfectionist? That feeling like I've got to do it just right. Excellence. It's excellence. And then when something goes the least bit wrong, there's all this trauma and all this turmoil in here. You know, what's that? The fight or flight. That's exactly right. It's fight or flight. And there are a lot of us. That was my thing, perfectionism. I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Do it right or don't do it.
Exactly. Do it right or don't do it at all. Do it right or don't do it at all. So if you have the least little question about if I can do this right, then I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try, because I know I'm not going to be able to do it right, whatever that means. So give yourself a break. Lighten up. Lighten up. We don't have to do everything perfectly. We're human beings. We're all human. We all make mistakes. Just do your best. Do your best. Back to the 4 agreements. So self-compassion will have you feel less anxiety, stress, depression, and that perfectionism. It also ultimately will give you greater life satisfaction, more motivation. It will give you more choices, and it will allow you to feel more connected to the people around you. Now, are those things that you all would love to have? Right? Who doesn't want to have more life satisfaction? Who doesn't want to feel more connected to the people they love, to their friends, to their family, to feel like they make a difference in the lives of others? So we have to acknowledge ourselves first. We have to love ourselves first, because we can't give to others what we don't have. The Dalai Lama says it this way: love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. Do you know there is a phenomenon in children called failure to thrive? Have you heard of that? You know how that happens, failure to thrive? Is when a child is born, infant, and they don't have someone to love them, to hold them, to take care of them, they die. They die. You might feed them. You might be able to hook them up to a gadget and make sure they get food, but they're not going to thrive. They're not going to survive. And it's called failure to thrive. It's something that happens. A lot of kids that end up in orphanages, who have nobody to hold them. More in other countries, I would say, than it happens here, but it does every once in a while. I told you I was an investigator with Department of Children and Families for a short time. And there were children in this country who suffer failure to thrive because there was not someone there to take care of them, to love them, to nurture them, to hold them. And it is part of our DNA. It's part of who we are. We all crave connection. Think about yourselves when something happens in your life, when it's good news. You've got the best news. You got the job you wanted. You're dating the person you wanted to be with. Whatever that wonderful thing happens to you, what is the first thing you want to do? I heard a couple of different answers.
Sabotage.
Well, that may not be the first thing, but that happens. That does happen. That voice of judgment. Was that?
Tell everybody.
Tell everybody. Tell everybody. You want to pick up the phone and you want to call your very best friend, the one who is going to celebrate that success with you. That is our instinct. That is the first thing we want to do, is reach out to somebody else and share with them that good news. How about when it's something bad, when some sad thing has happened to you? The same thing. The same thing. We want to reach out to somebody else and we want to share that part of ourselves. Put it on Facebook. We do. We want to share our experiences with other people because we are wired for connection. We are wired to connect with other people. We are wired for love and compassion. So what the Dalai Lama says is true. Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, we literally cannot survive. Compassion is the radicalism of our time. I had never heard that quote before. I found it last night. The idea of being compassionate in the world today does seem a little radical, doesn't it? Right? As we look around, if you're reading the same headlines I'm reading, if you're seeing the same stuff on social media that I'm seeing, compassion does not seem like the norm these days. Does not seem like the norm. But that is why we are here, gathered, speaking on this topic. Because I believe that we, in this movement, in New Thought, and people who are starting to wake up to what our purpose is and what we're here for, are understanding this. And we need to be the models of this. And it may feel like we're swimming upstream. It may feel like we're the only ones. But we're not. Look around you. Look around you. This week was at the graduation of 6 new ministerial students in Orlando. And we're not the only ones. We're really not the only ones. John Lennon sang about that in Imagine. Right? There are people out there who want, everybody, every human being wants to feel fulfilled. They want to feel happy. They want to feel joy in their own lives. That's another thing that we all share. Every one of us wants to do that. We want to make a difference in the lives of others. The problem is that we have allowed fear to dictate instead of allowing the love within us to lead the way. So compassion is the radicalism of our time. And next week, I'm really excited about our talk because I'm going to talk about how we use this. We start within first, and then we're going to talk about compassion for others. And I have a really cool spin on it, especially for those of you who came from Christian background. It's going to be very interesting. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. How many of you have heard that? The teaching of Jesus Christ boiled down to these things right here. To to love the Lord your God. And if God isn't your word, that's okay. Substitute something else. Love life. Love life with everything you've got, with your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Love living, love life. Love the universe, because it's all God. Love people. Just love. That is the first commandment. Love, love. Love, love. Yes, yes, just love, love. That is the first commandment. Love, love, love. Okay, the second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, what is inherent in that little phrase, love your neighbor as yourself, is saying, love yourself.
Yes.
Love yourself. And I don't even think it's a commandment as much as it is an affirmation. We love one another as we love ourselves. And what we're seeing today is evidence that people don't love themselves. Right? We don't love ourselves. How can we love others when we don't love ourselves? Right? So love, 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 love life, love people, love yourself. Just love. Just love. And if you're human beings, we're all human beings, we make mistakes. Sometimes you fall off and you might not be so loving that day. Somebody might speak to you before you have your coffee. You may not be feeling the love for that particular neighbor, but this is where we are called to step up. Each one, we are in a center for spiritual living. Our first value is spiritual growth and practice. You don't get brownie points for loving the people that love you. Right? Anybody can do that. The challenge comes in loving the people who may not be so lovable. Right? That's the challenge. That's what we're being called to do. That's what each and every one of us, and everybody who's watching, anybody who hears this, that's why you're hearing this message today. Because you know that you are being called to something greater than what you have been doing. And it begins with loving yourself. Having compassion for yourself. Y'all got it?